Hello everyone, I pray you're all well. You're welcome to today's lecture on Introduction to Soil Biology. So by definition, soil biology is a branch of soil science that deals with organisms and their impacts on the soil properties. Soil is a complex habitat, and because it is complex, it contains soil particles, it contains organic matter, water, roots, and various soil organisms. And the changes in its pH, moisture, pore size, and food types create a diverse soil habitat. So soil organisms are creatures that spend all or part of their lives within the soil. And we see that soil organisms live within and between soil particles. For example, in the picture below, you can see nematodes between soil clods. We have flagellates, we have ciliates, we have amoeba, and so on. We also have fungal hyphae for fungus and other bacteria within the soil. So we see that the majority of organisms that we see in the soil are found in the top 2 to 3 centimeters, where we have majority of the organic matter content. And each species exists where they find sufficient food, where they find sufficient space, sufficient nutrients, and sufficient moisture. We see that within the soil habitats, most organisms are concentrated around the roots, which we call the rhizosphere, in the plant litter, on the humus, on the soil aggregates, and in spaces between soil aggregates. So soil biota consists of microorganisms, soil animals, and plants living all or part of their lives within the soil. And this is according to the Soil Quality Institute. So we see all these organisms form what we call the soil biota. We have the actinomites, we have the fungi, we have the mites, we have the beetles, we have the ants, we have the flatworms, and so on. So all these form what we call the soil biota. So now let's look at soil organisms. So all organisms living within the soil are collectively termed as soil life or soil biota, like we've seen in the previous slide. And soil organism is any organism inhabiting the soil during part or all of its life. Soil organisms range in size from microscopic cells, which we cannot see with a bare eye, and these digest decaying organic material, to small mammals that live primarily on other soil organisms. So now let's look at the food web. The food web is composed of living components of the soil, and it contains several trophic levels, which indicates who eats who, or which organisms depends on which organism. The food web starts with the producers and ends with the consumers and decomposers. The energy and nutrients within the food web are lost at each step of the food web or each trophic level. The arrows that you will see will represent conversions of energy and nutrients as one organism feeds on the other. So this is the structure of a food web. We have the primary producers, we have the primary consumers, the secondary consumers, and the tertiary consumers. The primary consumers are mainly the plants, and mainly the green plants, which utilize sunlight to carry out photosynthesis. So when these ones decay, they form organic matter, which organic matter is fed on by the bacteria. So at the second trophic level, we have decomposers, we have mutualists, we have pathogens, parasites, and root feeders. So the main examples that we've been given here are bacteria, fungi, and nematodes. And then in the third trophic level, we have the shredders, the predators, and the grazers. And here we have mainly the arthropods, we have the nematodes, and the protozoas. And all these feed on the organisms in the second trophic level. Then in the fourth trophic level, we have the higher predators, where we have higher or bigger species of arthropods and nematodes. And then finally we have the animals or the small mammals and the birds, which feed on the higher arthropods and nematodes. So mainly we have the producers, and then we have the consumers and the decomposers. So the primary producers, like we've seen, are the autotrophs, or the plants, or lichens, or moss, or algae, or all plants that have the ability to produce their own food, or food that will be for animals in higher trophic levels. Okay, so like we've seen, we have the primary producers, which are mainly autotrophs, and these normally act as fuel for the soil food web. We have the heterotrophs, which are mainly in the second trophic level, and these rely on the organic materials that are produced in the first trophic level or by the producers. Then we also have soil organisms, which decompose materials and other organisms, and they convert nutrients into plant available forms. So what is the importance of the food web? The soil biological community improves simply by moving, eating, digesting, excreting, and dying. So with the food web existent, we have an improvement in the biological community within the soil. Then it also leads to soil structure improvement and stability. Now this is mainly because there is decomposition of organic matter, and with this organic matter in place, there is a formation of a better soil structure. Then there is improvement of porosity, infiltration, and aeration, mainly with the help of organic matter in the soil, but also other organisms which have numerous activities within the soil. There is also nutrient availability, and then there is also conversion of nutrients into more plant available forms. So now let's look at diversity and abundance of soil organisms. We see that the reason for greater biological diversity in the soil, more than in the upper or the above ground ecosystem, is that the soil provides greater diversity of habitat conditions and variety of food types compared to above ground. And we see that in agricultural land, we have 100 million to 1 billion bacteria that are present in the soil. We have several meters of fungi. We have thousands of protozoas. We have at least 10 to 20 nematodes per square meter. We have arthropods, which are a little less in number, and we have earthworms, which vary within 4 to 25 depending on the kind of soil that we are looking at. So now let's look at the classification of organisms. And this can be mainly by looking at the size of the organisms. And here we have the macro, the meso, and micro organisms. But we will start with the macro organisms, or the macrobiota. The macro are normally big in size and they are greater than 2 millimeters in diameter. These include vertebrates like the mice and moles, invertebrates like the earthworms and the mollusks, and the macroarthropods like the ants, the termites, and the beetles. Then we have the mesobiota, and these range between 0.1 to 2 millimeters in diameter. And these mainly include the microarthropods, the mites, the nematodes, and so on. And then we have the microbiota, or microorganisms, which are less than 0.1 millimeter in diameter. And these mainly include the bacteria, the fungi, the archaea, the algae, cyanobacteria, protozoa, and actinomites. We can also classify the soil microorganisms, or the soil organisms, by looking at their ecological function, or what they eat within the food web. So we can have herbivores, which feed on living plants. We have detrivores, which feed on dead plant debris. We have fungivores, which feed on fungi. We have bactivores, which feed on bacteria. We have predators, which consume animals, and parasites, which live on other organisms. We can also have classification of these organisms by looking at the carbon source. For example, we have the heterotrophs and the autotrophs. The heterotrophs use organic compounds as a source of carbon, and the autotrophs use carbon dioxide as a source of carbon. Then we also classify organisms by looking at the energy source, and where we have the phototrophs and the chemotrophs. The phototrophs get energy from sunlight, which they use in the process of photosynthesis. And then the chemotrophs get their energy from chemical oxidation of certain compounds within the soil. So thank you so much for listening, and in case you have any question, kindly raise it so that we can discuss it in our next virtual class.